As you can probably tell from the title of this video, I absolutely adore the TV show Fleabag, to the point where I pretty much watch it every year. And on my annual watch, I came across the most devastating part, where Fleabag tells the hot priest, "I love you," and in return he says, "It'll pass." Who knew such little words could cause so much hurt? Because the priest is saying in a less cruel way, "You'll get over it, emotions are fleeting, and all this will be behind you." And it's so gut-wrenching because it's such a clear moment of unrequited love. You know, this boundless love you feel for this one person doesn't feel for you back in the same magnitude despite you pouring your heart out to them. And such a moment will live with you forever until one day it does eventually pass. And like any normal person, I thought to make a video about it. So in this video, I'm going to be recommending 7 books that I very much feel like encapsulate this whole "I love you, it will pass" feeling. You know, in case the TV show didn't scar you enough. I was also trying to dress a little bit like Fleabag with the stripes because I feel like this is very much her look, but I don't know if people are going to catch on to that or not. But anyway, I'm Katerina, welcome to the channel. Alrighty, let's get into it. The very first book on my list is All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. This is a Japanese woman following a 34-year-old woman who lives alone and works as a freelance proofreader. And throughout her whole life, she's found herself unable to make meaningful relationships, whether romantic or platonic, with those around her, except for a couple of others also labelled as outsiders. However, one day she randomly encounters a man and something new stirs up inside of her. And as she's confronted with these new feelings, she begins to see the world in a different light and really start to explore who she actually is. I literally read this book in one sitting over the Easter holidays, and it's not because it's super short, but I just found it so quietly captivating, even in the most surprising way. Because the plot on paper doesn't really sound that interesting, but the author Kawakami has this godlike ability to write quite quiet and almost boring characters in the most interesting and gripping way. And I really love this book in the way that it explores this initial romantic love between two people, especially regarding the mystery of not really knowing the other person that well yet, along with the moments when you're not with them, such as recounting conversations in their head when you think of things that remind you of them. And I also really love the book because it showcases the fragility of relationships, that it doesn't matter how much you like someone, at the end of the day people can be incredibly fickle. But this book shows that it's okay because time will pass, and time heals all wounds, and eventually it will heal those feelings too, which is essentially what the priest tells Fleabag in the final scene. And I think this book is fantastic because it just encapsulates that whole scene from Fleabag so well. The second book on my list is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. This book follows the romance between two black artists living in southeast London, and it explores the challenges of creating emotional bonds whilst living under the constant stress of systematic racism, especially in a country where blackness is rarely celebrated and often rejected. I love this book so much because even though it showcases how two people can seemingly be destined for each other, they can still be torn apart by the fear and violence of external pressures they face. And this comes in many forms, such as the nature of masculinity, the exhaustion and trauma of racism and police brutality, and also just to be racially profiled and not be seen as an individual person. And the book very eloquently explores how these scars and insecurities can pull two people apart, even when the two individuals are perfect for each other, and that's what makes it so heartbreaking. This book has love, heartbreak, and hope all in one novel, which makes it such a powerful yet devastating read. And I felt all these same emotions when watching the Fleabag scene, so there you go. This book very much has that same energy. The next recommendation I have is Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. This novel follows a woman in her 30s who is objectively pretty successful. She's a confident and independent cookbook author with seemingly great family and friends. And after buying a new home and seeing all her friends get married off, she begins to feel the pressure of coupling up with someone because she's starting to feel her biological clock tick. However, after meeting a guy and after months of dating and pretty much love bombing, he then eventually ghosts her, hence the title of the book. This book was a little too painfully relatable to read, if I'm honest, and I tell my coupled off friends that literally dating in your late 20s/early 30s, especially in London, is literally like being in the trenches of hell. And this novel very much supported my feelings in that. Whilst this book could have just been a simple story of him ghosting her, I adore the author's writing because there is some phenomenal commentary on this whole idea of a woman's biological clock, and this pressure on single women to marry up and have kids is so great purely just just from societal norms. And this pressure especially increases when you see all your other friends at such a different life stage to you, and it's basically all that they talk about. However, even with that, the author explores the feelings of being ghosted so well. Like, it's literally so spot on how she describes the confusion, the anger, the betrayal, the loneliness, the sadness, etc. that all comes with being ghosted. But like with the scene in Fleabag, it basically showcases how all these feelings will eventually one day pass. And what one day seemed as a world-ending event will eventually just be a distant memory when you look back on it in time to come. Coming up next on my list, I have Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This is a novel of two strangers randomly meeting on a night in New York, and after knowing each other for only a short amount of time, they decide to get married. There's no actual plot here, but the story showcases the messiness and complexities of not so likable and flawed characters, especially when handling past traumas in modern day relationships. If you're about books with no plot just vibes, then this one's definitely for you, because it's incredibly character heavy and it mostly focuses around their conversations. And there are so many differences in this couple that the book follows, such as from age, as she's in her 20s and he's in his 40s, and also jobs, as she's an artist and he's a corporate exec. However, they bond through their trauma of their troubled family's histories, and they essentially attempt to find solace in one another to overcome this. Even though I feel like the book started off as slightly pretentious, I find that it did carry on to be incredibly engaging and interesting, because their conversations feel so real. I almost forgot I was reading a fictional novel at points, and the characters eventually come to realize that their relationship isn't built on sustainable grounds, which therefore makes the heartbreak in the novel so much more crushing, especially when you're meant to believe that love can essentially conquer anything. And it therefore makes the story feel so much more real, like the amazing conversations that were had in the TV show of Fleabag. And in the same manner, whilst both sets of characters still live each other, these feelings will eventually soon pass. I can't do these videos without at least one classic, so the next book on my list is White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This story is set in St. Petersburg, Russia, and it basically follows a man battling with his loneliness and also restlessness that comes from said loneliness. He's introverted, shy, and a bit of a daydreamer, and lives in self-pitying solitude until one day he meets a girl. This girl is also lonely, but for different reasons, and after a few conversations with one another, they believe that they've formed a solid connection. However, this is not a love story, it's a story about love, and more specifically, it's a tale of unrequited love and yearning. This is honestly such a classic and gorgeous novel on unrequited love, because it showcases that this initial alienation that brought these characters together is not the reason why they're going to stay together. Because unfortunately, such romanticism can't always survive in a realist world. And don't let the fact that this book is old and written in 1848 put you off from reading it, because I personally think that the fact that this book was written almost 200 years ago, where people were still experiencing the same emotions that we feel today when it comes to unrequited love, is honestly quite comforting, and it shows that we aren't alone today in the things that we feel. Although their rejection was probably more dramatic and romantic, it doesn't have the same charm as getting ghosted on a hinge. But this book is nothing short of I love you, it will pass energy, as the book starts off with such a warm sense of hope, to only be later crushed and shattered by the love that's not meant to be. But like with Fleabag, yes, you may have some intense feelings, but do not fear, because these will pass. The next book on my list is Notes on Heartbreak by Annie Lord. This is an autobiographical memoir of a young woman's relationship and breakup with her ex-boyfriend. It recounts when she first met him, the ups and downs of their relationship, and the aftermath of them parting ways. Alongside this, she explores being newly single, dating in London, disastrous rebounds, getting ghosted, etc, etc. Okay, whilst I did only give this book 2.5 stars on my March reading wrap-up, which I'll link below if you want to watch, I do think that this book explores the feelings that come with heartbreak and how all-consuming it can be quite well, especially when we live in a world where you're just kind of expected to carry on when you're going through a breakup. This book can be very validating and comforting, especially if you're currently going through one. And whilst I did find the author to be a bit whiny and repetitive as the book progresses, I'm adding this book to my list because she actually does eventually move on, believe it or not. And it solidifies this idea that even though at one point she was absolutely obsessed with this guy, when he is eventually with someone else, she finds herself not that fussed. past, and it's because it's past. And it gives hope in the fact that as time passes, so does your feelings. And whilst there were times I didn't really agree with the author's actions, it's good at showing that progress of healing through a breakup isn't always linear, and there's always going to be ups, downs, and lots of mess in between. Plus, I know so many others that rated this book highly, highly well, so maybe it's just me. So read this book and find for yourself whether you like it or not. And the very final book on my list is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a Japanese novella that centers around a cafe in the heart of Tokyo where the customers can travel back in time. However, there's a catch: the customers must come back to the present before their coffee gets cold. And in this book, we actually follow 4 visitors in the cafe. The first is a woman confronting a man who left them. The second is a wife visiting her husband taken by Alzheimer's. The third goes to see her sister for the final time. And the fourth goes to meet her daughter that she never got to know. I love this book so much. I think it's just fantastic, as it's an extremely character-heavy book, where the conversations the characters have are literally the backbone of the whole novel, because they discuss their situations, which some of them handle some incredibly tough topics in such a tender and compassionate way. And whilst the premise of the story essentially showcases how precious time is, I think it also showcases how important it is to get closure from these situations in order to move on with said time, which I think is incredibly important because it's very rarely talked about, as most people just say, oh, you know, time heals all wounds. But I do think it's important to get closure in order to facilitate this healing, whether it's from yourself or others. And I think this book explores how to have these conversations in order to get this closure. And I also love this book for exploring different types of love, not just the traditional romantic sense, as it's important to recognize that people go through familial heartbreak too. It's a hard-hitting and incredible book that I honestly think everyone should read, especially if the I love you, it will pass line hit you a bit too hard in Fleabag. And there you have it. Those are my 7 I love you, it will pass book recommendations. Like I said, in case the TV show didn't scar you enough, I thought I'd give you more recommendations to traumatize you even further. Let me know in the comments if you've read any other books that kind of give you the same energy as the scene in Fleabag. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please drop a like down below, and if you're new here, please subscribe. I make new videos every Tuesday and it'd be lovely to see you there. Feel free to also follow me on my Instagram. I post all my personal stuff on there, but I also post books as soon as I finish reading them, so you can see why I rated them out of 10 and also what they're about. And as always, thank you so much for being here and watching my videos and listening to my silly little opinions. And I'll see you next time. Bye!